All right. Well, I know we're 3 minutes past the top of the hour, so how do we get things rolling here to make best use of everyone's time? Um, so thanks as usual for everyone who's taking time out of their busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Just a couple of things to run through before we get started. For those who don't know me, my name is Ryan Greer. I work with a firm, Prairie Sky Strategy, and I'm also co-chair of the Canadian Chamber's National Cannabis Working Group. That working group is co-chaired by Nathan Meissen from Diplomat Consulting, who is also listening in and will be joining our discussion today. Um, as we all know, Health Canada is lined up and required to undertake its 3-year statutory review of the Cannabis Act starting this fall, which will be the 3-year anniversary of recreational adult use legalization. So last fall, the National Cannabis Working Group announced that we would be leading an industry review of the Act so that we can help identify some of the biggest priorities for industry and then jointly advocate on those to Health Canada. So today, this is the final of 6 public consultation sessions that we've been running since November, and I'm just have to say how incredibly appreciative I am of everybody who's taken the time to contribute, and I see that many of you have dialed into several or in some cases all of these sessions. This final public consultation is not the end of our review, but really it's the beginning. Following this, we'll be undertaking targeted consultations with our working group members, with public health advocates, academics, regulators, and others to develop the serious and substantive recommendations that we can advocate to Health Canada on in advance of their review next fall. If you would like to be involved in this work on an ongoing basis and other National Cannabis Working Group policy and advocacy initiatives, we would highly encourage you to get in touch and consider joining. As we continue to grow the group, it only increases our strength and our capacity to advance the industry's interests. I'd like to thank working group members Lisa Kearney from Davies and Eric Foster from Denton's. They and their firms have been helping lead this effort for us, and both of them have done a masterful job of moderating the first 5 sessions that we've done. In a few moments, I'll be turning things over to Elisa, who's going to moderate today's session. If there's anybody on the line that's joining us for the first time, just a couple of very quick housekeeping notes. I want to remind everybody that this is a public consultation, so members of the media or governments, regulators may be present for some or all of the sessions. So as with any public event, please keep in mind that any comments made during the session can be attributed to you or your organization. If there's any views or background information or anything you'd like to share that is not on the record, you can always do that by sending us an email to cannabis@chamber.ca. Again, for the first timers, we're using the life-size platform for the session. At the bottom of your screen, if you're joining us via the video chat, there's a hand-raising function. We're asking all participants to use that when they would like to speak. All participants will be muted, and then as you raise your hand, you will get the ability to unmute yourself temporarily. And this just helps ensure that we don't get caught with a bunch of background noise. If you're joining us by phone, unfortunately, you'll need to switch over to the video conference function if you'd like to raise your hand and intervene. And lastly, you'll find along the bottom of your screen a chat function, which you can also use to share views, links, or other information that you want to share with the group, including whether you'd like to agree or disagree with something somebody's making or add some additional context. We've found this chat function to be tremendously helpful in all of our previous sessions, and at the end of the consultation, we are also downloading that text and entering it into the record and putting it into our record of the conversation for this. So it matters just as much as anything you might say verbally. And then please, whether it's in the chat or if you're speaking up, please identify yourself and your organization before your comments. That's tremendously helpful for everyone. And then also, we've set up a series of poll questions for participants to answer, which will also help inform the results of this consultation. You can find a link to this poll currently in the chat. It's a Slido poll. That those polling questions are confidential, so those are not on the record. So you will not be identified through your answers to those. Those are not shared with media or anything like that. So that's one more way that you can sort of share some views during the session. We'll keep that poll open for sort of 30 minutes or so after this session closes. So with that, let's move on to the discussion. The topic of today's session is ancillary business issues, obviously a huge and crucial economic contributor and driver of Canada's cannabis economy. And I know representatives from many ancillary service providers have been joining us through these sessions, so we're looking forward to hearing from you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa Kearney from Davies, who's going to lead us through the session.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Is there an echo? Yeah, good. Okay.
Oh, I think you're muted now, Lisa.
Yeah, I think Leanne muted me to see if it was any better. I'm going to talk, but Eric, can you start? Because I think I need to switch headphones and phones or something.
Sure. Can you guys hear me now? Does that work, Ryan? Sorry, this is the first time I'm speaking. I'm trying to improve my technology to make it work better than last for you. So can you hear me, Ryan?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Excellent. So I'm Eric Foster from Denton's, I guess stepping in momentarily for Lisa as she sorts things out. So again, as Ryan alluded to, really excited to have everybody here today. Really important topic, and this is actually something that I know Elisa and myself deal with often, working in large law firms with a broad spectrum of clients. There's no question about this industry has attracted a lot of attention, not just from the folks on this call and who are actively involved in the industry, but of course, through a whole variety of other ancillary industries and opportunities. It's pretty rare, probably the first time in all of our lifetimes where a new industry has really gone from prohibition to being fully legalized, and within that has created a ton of opportunity. Again, not just for what you would think of as your traditional cannabis businesses, but so many other sections. And whether you're talking about picks and shovels and equipment manufacturing and all of the necessary things needed to actually cultivate cannabis, then you have, of course, transportation, security, construction. Then there's a whole financial aspect to this in terms of talking about insurance and banking and financing, payment processing, and just general consulting. So there's certainly no shortage of other industries that have come in to this sector, really looking to try to leverage the opportunity that I think most of us on this call already have also tried to leverage and to be involved in the industry. So, as Ryan pointed out early on in the process, really the goal of this roundtable and this whole process in general is to try to get feedback from the industry so we can go to Health Canada and present to them a set of amendments that we think would be helpful for the purposes of seeing this industry really grow and benefit all Canadians. Oh, I see, Lisa, you're back on. So happy to turn it back over to you if you'd like. But again, I think as Ryan, Lisa's gone again, so back to me. Again, encourage everybody to chime in, put your hand up. Right now, I guess I'm monitoring it. I know Elisa will be monitoring it as well. And maybe I'll try to kick it off with some of the initial questions that you would have received in advance of this. And, maybe we can start off with almost just a general discussion around the impact of the cannabis industry on ancillary services, industries and ancillary businesses. And I'm thinking about this kind of twofold. On one hand, would love to hear from anybody on the call who is actually not involved in a truly traditional cannabis business, but is involved in one of these ancillary businesses, and how you have been able to leverage the opportunity that is cannabis, and most importantly, where you've seen challenges. Because again, that's what we're trying to do here. We want this industry to grow and to blossom for everybody and not just benefit the cultivators and the processors and the retailers. There's just a tremendous, a broader opportunity for Canada. So would love to hear some thoughts from people involved in those industries and how the legislation has impacted them, and potential changes that may be desirable. And on the same point, would love to hear thoughts from actual cannabis operators in terms of who are those ancillary service providers that you're looking for, and what feedback have you heard from them? Has there been, for example, any service that you try to get from an ancillary industry or business, but you haven't been able to do that because the legislation, for example, or the regulatory framework doesn't permit you to do those sorts of activities, and you feel that maybe you should be able to? So I think it's those as an initial conversation point. I think those are kind of some of the thoughts, at least I'd be interested in hearing. And sorry, Elisa, are you back now? Can you hear me?
Are you? Am I good? I'm not echoing.
You're good to go.
Perfect. Okay, so I caught most of that. Sounds perfect. So why don't we jump in by hearing from cannabis companies, if people are prepared to sort of identify and comment on ancillary businesses who have been critical to their operations. None, zero.
We've got a shy crowd today, it seems.
Well, we have one raised hand. Leanne, perhaps you could unmute. I'm afraid I can't pronounce the individual's name.
Yeah, so it's okay. The name is Ancillary. It's okay.
Ancillary.
Yeah, I work for Scott's Miracle Grow, and we own Scott's Canada and Hawthorne Canada, and we play in the ancillary industry a lot when it comes to cannabis. And in fact, we partnered with a flower in BC to open I think I'll probably say the largest cannabis research center in North America is in Kelowna, BC. And so for us, the bill had a lot of impact on us because, first of all, we deal with a lot of LPs, what is Canopy, Aurora, and the rest. We sell them salt products, fertilizers, and growing media from Scott's Canada perspective. Now, on the other side, Hawthorne, we do a lot of lighting products and hydroponics that we sell to LPs. Now, one big area where we had an issue before was when Health Canada came with some regulatory framework dealing with good practices when it came to the issue of lighting for LPs, about how LPs had to do some reporting on explosion of lights in their facilities. But we had that straightened out. But the most important thing that always affects us as ancillary industries is that there is really no direct communication to us by Health Canada. So we do get all this communication like indirectly because they come up with regulatory framework or policies that do affect LPs. And LPs then come to us and say, hey guys, well, this is what Health Canada just came up with. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to have to deal with this issue for us. Take, for example, the lighting issue I just brought up. That was big for us, although Health Canada didn't come up to us and tell us you have to manufacture lighting that doesn't have to explode, but if it explodes, then it doesn't have to shatter and, kind of contaminate the crops. But they have this direct communication with LPs, but we, the ancillary industry, we don't get it directly. So that was one issue which we have with them. Now, when we're talking about the Cannabis Act itself, of course, there are some direct areas too that do affect LPs that also affect us. You're talking about things like advertising, marketing issues, and sales. Those affect us directly. We would love to be able to sell some of our products in your regular big box stores and brand it or market it in such a way that it is not glorifying cannabis culture, but then also shows that it's for cannabis, but then we can't do all of that. So those are one of a couple of the things that affect us as an ancillary business.
Thank you, Afray. That's very interesting. And so if I may just sort of ask you a follow-on question, if you're comfortable answering it, and this may, I think, apply to a lot of ancillary businesses, is that, you know, a company like Scott's in the inputs market, or, you know, anyone in the payments market or financial services market may, prior to the legalization of cannabis, had served similar industries, in your case, perhaps similar agricultural industries, etc. And so it is quite surprising to hear that you have had no direct communication, and that your insights or recommendations, you know, haven't been consulted when it comes to certain things where you have an expertise in businesses that, in many respects, could be analogous. And so I guess the question there, really, for you and for other ancillary businesses to think about is, are there learnings that you can impart based on your other businesses that, you know, could be used to the benefit of the cannabis industry, should you have an opportunity to provide that sort of consultation, whether formally or informally, to Health Canada and other regulators that touch the cannabis sector?
Absolutely a lot. In fact, I'll tell you something. When we started having this issue, I remember, I think that was about 2 or 3 years ago, I did have a meeting with the folks at Health Canada, and we suggested something, for example, in the area of, let's just take, for example, the area of fertilizers, which the guys in Health Canada doesn't really understand. And the folks that understand that is Canadian Food Inspection Agency. They understand a lot about fertilizer and how fertilizer works with plants. So, but Health Canada just come up with some, regulatory framework that doesn't make sense. So we suggested to them and said, why don't we have like a working group whereby you will deal with CFI, have folks from CFI, so that you can talk together to bring in all this knowledge and expertise that they have, so that you can tap in from them. But Health Canada just refused. From my experience and from our experience, I'll tell you, we've done a lot of outreach to Health Canada, but it's been really tough. And I cut them a little slack, all because cannabis is new to them. And as a result of that, there's still a tight lead on how to go on cannabis, because, let's be frank, even though the Liberals did bring in cannabis, they're still very kind of conservative about it. We've not been able to really exploit this industry the way we're supposed to do. And maybe they're worried about part of their base that is still not open to cannabis. So we have a lot of experience that we can bring in. And not only companies like ours, even within Health Canada, the CFI is part of Health Canada. The PMRA is part of Health Canada. They have a lot of experiences in other ancillary products that our own industry produce, that LP uses, that it can provide this expertise to the folks in Health Canada to tell them, look, you don't need to over-regulate these guys anymore, because we understand these products and this is how it interacts with cannabis as a crop, but they don't just take it.
Great, thank you. And I think you've touched on an important point. I mean, understandably, as you noted, this is a new industry, conservative approach with some people who are not supportive, and so it continues to have some political sensitivities around it. And so for those even within the government that can perhaps assist, it wasn't their jurisdiction, it wasn't the mandate that was handed to them. And so I think even internally in government, you had some resistance. So I think it will be sort of something that we might want to consider raising as part of this Cannabis Act review, is even, and we've seen this in other areas, is just to encourage Health Canada to reach out to other parts of the government. So like all industry, this becomes a more wholesome view, as opposed to solely within this protected jurisdiction of Health Canada, because there's a lot to benefit and learn. So for those and other ancillary businesses that have had similar experience, whether it's in the financial services, packaging, logistics, distribution, who in your perhaps other parts of your business are involved with different parts of the Canadian government that you think could impart their knowledge to Health Canada, I would be interested in hearing that from you as well. So I do see we have a couple of hands. Alufe, thank you very much for your comment. I think now we will move to Cole, and then after Cole, we'll move to Barry.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you guys all for putting this on here today. I think this is really important that we actually have these ancillary call discussions, if you will. I guess I'm the owner of a company called Veteran Express Secure Logistics. We're focusing on basically creating a new category of supply chain logistics that allows us to merge the security of the armored car space with the high volume transport of the general freight industry. Why that's important is that we've just found, through our research and sitting back, with the development of or the rollout of the cannabis industry, that, really the primary goal to what we are aiming to offer is quality assurance on the product, right? Like everybody has, is putting out some amazing, instruments to test product, to grow product, to get all that, so that the consumer is truly delighted. But obviously there's an elephant in the room where, how is that product being handled? What are the QA functions behind that? And what are the QA programs to govern, the quality handling of that product from point A to point B? How does it get through? And then obviously with this massive, surplus of cannabis within the system, vaults are overflowing, lack of storage capacity, throughout all the provinces. We are really just focusing on how can we bring a solution that's kind of conducive to all provinces so that, the same SOPs and the same QA function is applied throughout all the provinces instead of being so fragmented. The biggest problem that we're seeing right now is obviously supply chain visibility fragmentation. So just because you ship with one company from say West Coast to East Coast, it may change hands anywhere between 2 and 20 times. We're getting that supply chain fragmentation as far as visibility goes. And when it comes to product recalls and it comes to, identifying where the problem exists, it really always falls back onto the head of the LPs. They were solely responsible for this. But again, as we've identified, there's concerns that the LPs just don't have any control over, or they have a low amount of control over the accessibility to a purpose-built, quality-driven type, platform in order to specialize in moving these products in such high capacities, of course, right, in a less than truckload model. So I guess that's one part that we've identified as, we're really excited about, having these discussions this year, is to bring some of these topics up, as we know that technology is really going to assist this industry in being able to bring a lot more assurance and lower risk to insurance policies, to stakeholders, to businesses, and even to the consumer, as they're able to see, where some of these product recalls may lie and where the inefficiencies are targeting. So I guess as we move forward, this wasn't necessarily a more direct, this is a very broad, this is a very big topic, but we're excited to be part of this discussion, hopefully this year, in order to identify some of these gaps within the supply chain, some of these visibility gaps as well, and bring some real good supply chain visibility technology, both to the merging of the physical handling of the product as well as the digital handling of the product, to make sure that that information is not fraudulent, it's true and factual, and people can count on that information to be, reliable, if you will. So.
Great, cool. That's very interesting. Super important initiative as the industry matures. So you don't have to answer now, but I guess something for you to think about. And if you want to comment after my question, please do. Otherwise, you can send us a note or answer in the chat. Is whether you have had experience to date. Like, are the regulators, both federally and provincially, prepared to engage with you in your discussions? Is there reception to what you're trying to do, or are people still being protective?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, I'm happy to answer that question, because I think this is the question that most people have, who takes the first leap, what does that look like? Where does the regulations, how's it going to be legislated? And is this on a provincial or a federal landscape, right? This is really just an all-inclusive conversation that we're having with LPs that we're shipping for right now. We got processors in the midstream. Some of them require Health Canada licenses. Some of them don't. We're discussing about Iotron and irradiation, that kind of thing. So again, we've seen this fragmentation happening, but it seems like there's a common theme that everybody wants to have this conversation and have an understanding. It just, for us ourselves, we've kind of taken the initiative to write the QA programs, to write the HSE programs that are specializing in this space, so that we can have something and a tangible result to at least put a finger on and have a discussion about, instead of the kicking the ball back and forth between federal and provincial. So our goal is to bring this standard that's a nationwide standard, the same SOPs are in BC as they are in New Brunswick, right to the back door of those AGLC, BCLC, OCS, and all these other guys, as well as between the B2B, networks. And we're seeing actually that, we haven't had in real in-depth provincial talks yet, because again, as we set out our solution on how we're offering that supply chain visibility, now we feel like we're at that point in 2021 where we can present something that's going to say, oh, wow, instead of customers paying, 6 hours of wait time at AGLC to wait for their products to be hand counted, we may have a solution that's actually going to give them that manifest in those documents that they can consider are true and factual, and lower the amount of labor burden on the AGLC or these provincial distribution hubs, and also lower the cost for the LPs or anybody else that has to pay for that wait time for that truck to sit there, for 6 hours and wait for them to be hand counted. So we're talking about it. There's a significant amount of issues here that I guess we can talk about both on a provincial and federal, but I think everybody's just open. Everybody's open to have this conversation, and this is what we're excited for.
Good. That's very positive. I mean, it's a positive outcome, and hopefully this group can, assist you and everyone you're working with on getting to that next stage. So Barry, why don't we turn it over to you, Barry Davidson?
Thanks, Elisa, and I just want to say I'm a little humbled looking at who's on the list in here, so thanks for giving me some time to chat. I want to reiterate a few things we just heard from both Cole and Afraid around that need to pull our regulators' internal departments together. We have seen government firewall their departments so often, especially Health Canada, but many do it with the eye to, and it's an honorable approach to create something new that doesn't have the baggage of the past. But the problem with that is you tend to start something new without the wisdom of the past either. So that's, I think, where we're sort of landing. That one of the things Cole said I wanted to talk about a bit was that connection point to the regulator. And part of the problem we're running into across the provinces is the inconsistency in that downloading. So there's so much here to unpack, and I could ramble for hours, but one of the things I would be recommending, and we have in several other countries as consultants within the realm globally, is ensuring that early on there is a credible and an authoritative connection point for industry into the regulator. It can't be as simple as call a frontline person. If Cole needs to call on policy, or if Furry needs to call on policy, it can't be like a 311 call where they're going to put it in the system and get back to you in a week. You need to be able to get in. And I work with Diplomat Security and Canada Navigators and Hyde Advisory and several other consulting firms. And that confusion has created a great opportunity for us because we have connections into government. But that should be a formalized connection point. There should be somebody posted that, here's your FAQs, but if you actually have a solution or a policy question, you can get to somebody enough in the know that even if they can't answer it right away, they have access to the higher levels of policy and regulation. So that's a definite checkbox, and we try to advise that with other regulators. A little bit of a venting, that inconsistency across the provinces. I'm often amazed that governments are eager to download and learn along the way, so it's not their fault, but they can take credit for it when it gets fixed later by whomever. And I really think one of the lessons we should see here that I would say to other regulators is, at some point you need to start with, here are the clear targets, here are the clear benchmarks, but we also recognize these are going to change. So aim for those, and let's talk about how they change. The idea of outcome-based policy coming out of government in a brand new industry, when we don't know yet what that outcome, we know what we're aiming for, we don't know how to get there, I think has created immense confusion that, rather sadly, has helped those of us in the consulting side, because we're able to work through and find the creative ways to get there. But it would have been far easier, my capitalistic side, it would have been far easier to sit down and say, here's what I need to achieve, and here's how I need to do it to get to the license, and I'll let my business strategy and my business plan solve the rest. So at least I could go on for hours, but I'm gonna stop there. There's my 2 cents worth.
Great. Thank you, Barry. Now, certainly there seems to have been a financial legal consulting industry that has blossomed over the cannabis space, which is not surprising in a new industry, but not necessarily in the best interests of the actual operating entities themselves. So I see we have another hand from Amar.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Amar Singh. I'm the CEO of Elevated Signals, and yeah, thanks for providing this forum today. I'm probably going to echo a lot of what the previous commenters and speakers said, like Cole, Barry, and Ofuri, but just a bit of intro to what we do. We're Elevated Signals. We're based in Vancouver. We're a tech company that is part of the modern generation of software developers that are trying to bring innovative new solutions to help the industry in the areas of quality and production management. So we currently work with companies like Pure Sun Farms, Aurora, Tantalus Labs, Rubicon Organics, Decibel, and many more. And what we've done for them is we've changed the way that they do inventory tracking. We're, I guess, second generation, more user-friendly and more accurate inventory tracking and traceability combined with digital record keeping. So we're one of the few companies, or the first company, that's been able to combine inventory records with quality records so that we can create a full GPP or GMP level batch record with one click. So the point of all that is that, you know, we've been able to bring great efficiencies in terms of being able to capture all this quality information about how each batch is produced from seed all the way to packaged good. And that saves our customers lots of money and efficiency and risk reduction. Now, in terms of speaking to government and the consultation that we're looking for is, yeah, we would love a forum with Health Canada. In fact, during the development of our product back in 2018, I think we had about 4 meetings with various directors at Health Canada, got really good feedback. One of them came to our office and met with us and one of our current customers, and they were excited about what we were building. And at that point, we weren't even really fully launched. We were just in beta. Now we got 50 contracts signed. We're deployed at over 35 facilities. So now we're in the market. We brought the solution that seemed to be beneficial for the industry from Health Canada's perspective. And I've been trying to get back in touch and hitting a bit of a wall there. So I think, yeah, I'm sure everyone's super busy, but I think it'd be great to have a forum where we could bring some of our learnings on how we've been able to transform quality management, which again is like an operational efficiency for the producers, but it's also a measure of risk monitoring for the safety, the health and safety of these products that are being consumed by Canadians. So there's a few areas that I think we could talk to Health Canada about this, and which would be, they're doing with COVID, we're able to provide a way for producers to operate more effectively with less staff on site. The same would apply to Health Canada. They don't have to, like, we've had our customers doing virtual inspections using Elevated Signals, which is like a 700-page cleanly formatted batch record that can just be shared virtually, versus if you're not on Elevated Signals, we've heard stories of people taking 600 photos of paper. So that's just like time that shouldn't be spent. It should be devoted to actually improving the quality of the products. There was also an article that I saw, the Health Canada put out a statement that they're looking for ways to reduce or improve the carbon footprint of the industry. And this is another way, like, you don't have to fly to site to do virtual inspections. It's going to make the inspections go a lot quicker for smaller producers that are really just trying to get off the ground, especially the micro cultivators. And yeah, so we got a bunch of ideas. We've been doing this for the last 4 years. We've been in the market actively with producers for the past 2 years. Personally, it'd be a bit self-serving to say that it'd be great if, Health Canada would almost enforce or encourage digital record keeping, but I think there are benefits to that, but some people are going to want to stick with paper, and that's fine. But at least we want to be able to have a forum where we can present what we think the benefits are of modern technology that just hasn't existed in this industry before.
Great, thank you very much, Amar. Follow-up question for you, and maybe Alufe maybe also have some thoughts on this. I'm not sure if you were involved in a similar initiatives in the software space for other industries before you got involved in cannabis, or if you identified an opportunity and had to do some sort of research about how it worked in other sectors. But what I'm curious is whether you think in other agricultural sectors there would be that contact point. Maybe it is with the CFIA or some other body that, yes, Health Canada engaged with you at the beginning and provided positive feedback, but now you're sort of left on your own. If this wasn't the cannabis space, it was one of the more mature industries, who would it be that you would have been able to speak to about just ongoing development?
Oh, that's a great question, but yeah, I can't really speak to a parallel there. I used to work on research greenhouses for universities, and then we came together to build, like, yeah, first time in the cannabis industry when we got into this. So
because it sounds like quite similar to the point that Alufe was making, right? That, you know, of course their hands have been full and they're trying to get this industry off the ground, and of course now Health Canada with COVID has even more on their plate than previously. But if they're not taking advantage of the other knowledge base within the government, that seems like an easy fix that we should be encouraging, which is why I asked the question. So perhaps offline we can do some research and figure out, when you're looking at, you know, tracking and traceability and inventory control in other food, agricultural based products, how does that structure look like, and is there a way to sort of feed the two together? Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have no more hands at the moment, and I'm trying to monitor the chat here. There has been some chat around, not surprising, the marketing and advertising space, and a comment was made from someone in the marketing and advertising services that, you know, similar to Cole or to, I guess, to Scott's experience, there was no consultation as they were formulating some of the marketing rules from people who may have had some insight based on prior experiences. So I think one of the other topics that we wanted to speak about, if we have no other comments, sort of generally speaking about the roles of ancillary businesses or experiences of ancillary businesses, are any direct or indirect costs that have been imposed on ancillary businesses that are therefore driving up the end cost of cannabis? And that's, you know, quite a specific question, and may not be appropriate for this forum. But if anyone who is operating in ancillary businesses wants to give that some thought, I think that would be sort of interesting statistics for us to feed into the analysis. And also we've spoken to some of the challenges that have been faced by the ancillary businesses. I'd be interested also in hearing some positive stories. We've had a couple of positive stories as well, but, you know, welcome others. We haven't heard from anyone in the finance, payments, insurance space. I know we did have a few people registered. I'm not sure if they were able to join in the end, but perhaps if you are an ancillary business that provides payments, services, insurance services to the cannabis industry, I would be interested in hearing your experiences, particularly if you previously or continue to operate in other businesses as businesses, and can compare and contrast your experiences in cannabis with what you're doing in other sectors. So we did have a hand pop up. Michael.
So can you hear me?
I can.
Fantastic. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for this platform. What a wonderful time to share and exchange ideas. My name is Mike Natude. I'm a partner at BFL Canada. We are a national firm that insures really any and all companies, from public to private. Directors and officers liability is just simply a crux and an issue here currently as we stand, and we're here to build capacity. There's some familiar faces here and some familiar names, so it's good to see everybody. But yeah, just happy to jump on this call, and thanks to Khadijah Thornhill for the invite. So I just want to give a shout outs there.
So, I mean, I take it from your comment then that it's more difficult to provide the insurance in the cannabis space than in some of the other sectors. I mean, without getting into the business, into the specifics, do you see that sort of loosening up, I suppose, over time as the industry matures and some of the either real or perceived risks that existed around cannabis go away, that the insurance profiles that you provide in cannabis will align with some of the other agricultural sectors? Or how do you sort of see this moving forward?
Lisa, that's a great question. And, progressively, we do see it at some point opening up, but it's just a matter of time, or it's a matter of what to do presently with the rising costs of risk. In some cases, we have seen some operators really being priced out from an insurance standpoint, leaving a lot more leverage, or your assets are a bit more leveraged in that sense, where you're really exposed to a lot of things, especially when you have, international plays. Right now, we are really waiting for the US and what's happening with our neighbors down south as that opens up. There are some insurance companies that are restricted simply because they're American based. Without getting into specifics, I'll probably get into specifics. Companies like AIG and Liberty, who are typically the most innovative of insurance companies, they can't write anything Canadian, or they can't write and support the Canadian side of things. So we've had to actually find capacity offshore. We actually have to go across the pond in the UK with some UK markets, and including some Caribbean plays. So we're looking at some stuff now. So it's really a matter, at least, of what to do now. But yeah, insurance in itself, aside from the cannabis side of things, the D&O, cost of D&O, and cyber, well, in fact, has been on a rise since really 2017. And with what's happening now with COVID, and it's not something I agree with, frankly, but insurers have sort of used this as an excuse to collect more premium and to charge a lot more, in the anticipation of paying claims or future claims related to COVID. So it's not just the cannabis side of things; it's also the pandemic. But I personally don't really agree with that. They've been sitting on their high horse, and in the Canadian market, at least, there hasn't been any massive D&O claims related to cannabis. So just throwing it out there.
So on my last question, I'm sure we could talk about this forever, but it's extremely interesting, and something perhaps that people who are deep into the cannabis business don't have time to think about, because they're trying to operate their business, and so all of a sudden they're found being in a situation where they have to seek this insurance and can be surprised by the cost that they're incurred. How much do you think? Obviously some of this is just going to come with maturity, both the domestic and internationally, of course. But do you think there's a role here for an industry platform, or for example the Chamber of Commerce, to be collecting data that can be used to educate insurers, to demonstrate, for example, that okay, you've been insuring the industry now for 2 years or 3 years, here is the evidence to demonstrate that we are not actually have a different risk profile than someone else? Or do you think the actuaries have that sort of under control, and we don't need to, the industry itself doesn't need to sort of provide input into that debate?
We were all taking the same journey and the same path. And it's funny how, from the actuarial side and from the insurance side of things, they sort of already know the path in their infinite wisdom. But there's obviously a bridge. There's a gap between, how this plays out in the cannabis space. Frankly, they're not even considering the legacy market and all the, there's that side of it that I think hasn't been overly utilized or leveraged. So there's a lot of gaps, I think. And, like the Chamber of Commerce, I think that's such a great platform and forum to get industry together. One of my thoughts was to simply do this. We have been trying to form a working group, to your point, Elisa, of really lobbying with the insurance companies, expressing really what the concerns are and the support that we need from this institution or from these industries. Finance in itself, I don't think has been a great supporter of growing the cannabis space, at least here in Canada. So to your point, is the Chamber of Commerce an absolute necessity and a tool? Absolutely, without a doubt. I think the more collective we can become, and the more collective our story is, that we can bridge and translate, what our needs are to the needs of really these institutions. I
think we lost you at the end, but I really like the way you use the term bridge and translate. I think in so many things that we're discussing, translating from on the ground what you're experiencing in your daily business to the regulatory speak, to the policy and what is going on in the minds of the regulators is crucial. So thank you so much for your comments.
Absolutely. Here for any of that. And on top of that, there's a lot of micro producers out there as well that aren't getting the benefit of scale and leverage as of yet, but have a really good story to tell. So these are, there's so many pockets of opportunity, I think, that a lot of institutionalized firms don't necessarily see yet. And I'm here to help bridge that. So Lisa, thanks for the time. I'm going to go on.
Thank you very much. Great, thank you so much. So next we'll move on to Fern, and then after Fern to Malka.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So good to see everyone. I was on the last call, as many of you were. Great to be back here with you. So Merco Payments facilitates payments across the cannabis sector. And for my part, I've been at it really since the end of 2017. So have watched so much change happen across the industry. It's great that there's so much interest, and thank you to the Chamber and to Davies and Denton's for tackling this in a collaborative way. I think, you know, when the industry comes together and speaks collectively, we're heard in a different way, and that's so important. So that part is great. Just a couple of comments, Michael. I was listening to your feedback about, you know, the overhang of the U.S., and I think that's very valid. You know, very, very much relevant in the financial services sector as well. We certainly deal with a lot of clients, retailers, or even licensed producers or other ancillary businesses that may lose their bank account, even though what they're doing is perfectly legal. And I think it is the, you know, it's the added compliance risk of dealing with someone who's in the industry. So I think from an overall legislative review in terms of feedback that we can share with government, where, you know, this is a regulated industry and it's very easy to validate who's actually done the homework and done their work to be compliant and get properly licensed. And if you are one of those businesses or you're dealing with those businesses, there shouldn't be this sort of premium of extra effort or extra cost or extra hoops to jump through when things are now legal. If I think back to the beginning of COVID and the relief programs that were announced by the federal government, and even the extension of some of those programs to the cannabis sector, and a lot of people on this call came together to advocate for those programs to be extended to the sector because initially they weren't. It's just another example of reinforcing. And I think that there's a role for government to support us there, us as an industry and all the ancillary businesses, to say, this is now legal business. And you can figure out who's you know, a legal player, a compliant player in it. And that sort of ties into my second point. I do think there's a role for an increasing role for enforcement, because for those who have done the work to be compliant, to respect the regulations, incurred the cost, taken on the burden, the compliance burden, it's not a level playing field when you're competing with those who haven't, and they get to continue to run their businesses as though they're running legal businesses without any repercussions. So I think that's also a piece of the feedback that we need to be continuing to share as part of the original mandate for legalization. It was to, you know, provide safe supply and ensure that the supply was getting into the hands of the people who it should, in terms of being the right age and so on. I could go on, but I think I'll stop there for now. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Fern, I have a question for you. I think, Michael, this question may also apply to your business, and the comment about the overhang of the U.S. And we've talked about this with respect to the cannabis businesses themselves, the plant touching cannabis, and that is steps or initiatives that the government should be doing to not lose the head start that Canada had, to not disadvantage the Canadian businesses that have spent the last, 3 years investing a lot of time and money into growing a business, for it all to be overtaken by pre-existing large U.S. companies once the U.S. legalizes cannabis. And so for someone like, you in a payments business, I think that risk is probably real, where right now maybe there are not as many competitors that you're facing because they're not able to enter. Do you see anything that, recognizing that, of course, it's beneficial for Canada to have small, medium-sized businesses. We've grown a lot of businesses out of this new industry. Are there things the government could be doing with the framework, or just, again, back to these communication points, that will ensure your longevity as some of the U.S. overhang disappears and you are facing more competition? That's as an ancillary business.
Yeah, maybe just a quick comment on that. Look, it's now legal. We're entering our third year of legalized recreational cannabis. We shouldn't treat the industry as though it's something that's still precarious or, you know, that we're not proud of and supportive of. And I think the industry very much speaks that way. I'm not sure the Canadian government is sort of lined up with that philosophy, if I can say it that way. And so I think thinking about it as a real meaningful industry that will continue to grow and ensuring that the pillars are in place to support it. And I think there's, there are many others, better positioned than I am to speak to the barriers for the licensed producers or retailers, which, more falls to provincial governments, to help support the industry growth, marketing opportunities, efficiencies in the supply chain. Amar was talking a bit about that as well in his comments. So I think there's lots of opportunity. I think the federal government should be thinking about the fact that, yeah, it will change. It absolutely will change when the landscape changes in the US. It'll be very powerful, and there will be impacts, both positive and negative, for the industry. We shouldn't take our eye off the ball there, for sure.
Thank you so much, Fern. I mean, if I can sort of encapsulate what you and Michael's two quotes, they to me are really quite strong. As part of what this group could be doing is to be ensuring that we're messaging the need to be both proud and supportive of what is a legal cannabis industry and bridge and translate that gap that still exists, that's perhaps creating some hurdles to the industry going forward, which will, as you say, once the landscape changes, can continue to be beneficial for all Canadian businesses. Thank you so much. So Malka, over to you.
Thank you very much, Elisa. I'm Malka LaBelle, the founder and CEO of the Green Generation Company. I've spoken with many of you individually and collectively, and several of the groups that I'm in, both the BC Craft Farmers, National Cannabis Working Group, the ISO Standards Council, trying to create some of these definitions for a global standard. And what I've learned in all of these things is that the Canadian government still holds a huge stigma against cannabis and don't treat this industry as an equal player to other businesses or to other individuals. So I think I said it in the chat to Nathan's comments as, what does a business need to create a level playing field? The answer is equality. If we're all treated as equals until proven otherwise, instead of the way that it is now, which is we're guilty until we have to prove that we're not, that's how I feel that the framework that has been set up is still hampering the industry. And the government has the ability to turn that around with a lot of simple things that we don't have to go into now. But equality is the answer. Treating everybody and every business equally and starting from that base point as a basic need will essentially allow some of these hurdles to be cleared, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Malka. And I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, it does remind me of some of the conversations we had and in some of the earlier roundtables where we were really talking about, the data that exists out there that may be needed to equalize the industry in the eyes of the policymakers around other types of issues, principally around, of course, health and youth, etc. Okay, we have another hand. Oh, no, we don't. That's it. Malka, you are my last hand raised there. So, and we are right at the top of the hour. So we have another 30 minutes. The conversation so far has been excellent. I wasn't sure where it was going to go, whether we would have enthusiasm and engagement from the ancillary businesses and the cannabis companies that you support, but clearly we have, and clearly there are a different set of what I would say are they're not unsurmountable. They are surmountable challenges that I think this group is well poised to address. I see a hand just raised. Nathan, was that? Yep, that was you. So I know, Nathan, you've been listening from afar a little bit and contributing to the chat. So we welcome you to the stage.
I'm sorry, I was child rearing today. It's a pandemic world, right? So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for the conversation. I think it's really important. And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that ancillary businesses probably are one of the most important aspects of the cannabis sector for us to advance the cannabis sector in Canada. One of the reasons that we had the conversation with the Chamber originally was because of their role bringing traditional economic actors to the table to inform, educate, and illustrate the economic opportunities that are being created by cannabis legalization. The people here today aren't growing, they're not retailers, so they are businesses like the story where Amar tells, where he was a business prior to that pivoted into taking that subject matter expertise and is building a software company. There's lots of those stories from people there, from Michael at BFL to the legal profession with yourself and Eric, and how you pivoted into the space. And those are the stories that I think is so important for us to represent in the year of review. Again, when we look at the StatsCan's numbers, you know, if we take a $15 billion economic contribution to the Canadian economy, of which $3.5 billion on the high side is retail and cultivation, that means ancillary businesses are contributing $11.5 billion to that economic contribution. That is more than growers or retailers. Therefore, it is greater opportunity for traditional businesses to show the impact in the community. And if we can have ancillary businesses being the tip of the spear, leading the conversations with policymakers, influencers, and politicians who do have a stigma, who still do actually believe the worst things about the cannabis sectors that we're all rasped about, smoking joints, laying around, instead of professionals who are creating job, taxation, and revenue. I think there's a way to do it, and that's why I think it's so exciting that this conversation is happening. The other thing is, I really believe that the ancillary businesses are the way to add the conversation about what can be done domestically, but the role for Canadians to take that success internationally. It is going to be much easier for non-regulated businesses from the ancillary market to go abroad than it is a cannabis retailer or a cannabis cultivator. So you have that opportunity to be, we can develop at home and regain that subject matter expertise and take it to the world. And I think that's a story in a COVID recovery that is so important. And the people on this call who have said that they're interested in adding their voice, we need you to stand up in this time, because it's really important where we can actually create significant change. And that's why this conversation was one of the ones that I was listening and baited, and then very tough for me not to wade in until now. So I'm really excited about the conversation, and thanks everybody for taking part. But this is the group that actually can help create more change than cultivators and retailers. And I think that's something important for us to keep in mind.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I'm just here looking at the hands. And I think, Jonathan, you may be, I was watching some of the chat, and you may be actually well positioned to answer the question that came to mind as I was listening to Nathan. I know in the early days of legalization, there was discussion amongst consultants, particularly consultants that were going abroad, about this fine balance between finding fault and good things with the framework, because of course the more divergence there is internationally from the Canadian framework, the more difficult it will be for ancillary businesses and the like to be successful abroad, because there will not be that commonality. So I think there is a bit of a tension there, to the extent that we are finding fault with how the Canadian industry has built. We want to see change, but at the same time, there are companies that are well positioned now to basically mimic what has already been done internationally. So I don't know, Jonathan, I'll give you the floor to say whatever you wanted to say. You don't have to address my question, but something that comes to mind if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Government policy gets me really excited, especially being in this space, mainly because I'm a former, policy developer. Spent like almost 20 years with the Ontario government developing a lot of law and policy. So when I see conversations like this and the groups in the chats that we have, it's really helpful, because, governments, especially in a new industry, they don't get to hear these detailed conversations. They don't get to hear the challenges. Sometimes, they put out they try to do engagement as best as they can. But when you come to a new industry like ours, we don't have those strong voices, like a lot of the people have already previously mentioned. Just like even Nathan mentioned, we need to build more partnerships with the ancillary industries to get them to talk to government, because they already listen to those folks, right? They already know those folks' challenges. And then if those people can convey what the challenges here in cannabis are, that really strengthens our positions. Going back to the whole idea of the U.S. overhang,
we're going to get obliterated in Canada. We're going to lose our opportunity to be leaders once the US legalizes, because we are so far behind. It's been 3 years now, and they still haven't loosened up the purse strings on some of the regulatory oversight here, right? Like, you look at it from financially to sales and advertising to even the insurance industry, because insurance is a big problem for me. We're not treated equally. Like, we are definitely not treated equally, and there's not enough data out there to help these ancillary businesses understand our plights and the challenges. So I guess my next question is basically moving forward. I think having these calls are great, and I've been on a few of these, and I've met some people, and you know, it's great, but how do we advance this? I think, how does, like, the Canadian Chamber, for example, you know, follow up and you know, maybe provide more detailed discussions on insurance, provide more detailed discussions on sales and advertising. I think that would be a good next step for us to move forward, because there's a lot of good people on this call, and I think if we got together, organized ourselves a little bit better, brought some more data together, because we always talk about data, I think we can have a bigger voice, and I think some of these challenges can then be addressed if we get our act together, I guess, and have a little bit more discussion and formalize these challenges to the government. It's not just the federal government, it's also the provincial governments that are doing these things as well, right? So we might have some more traction at that level, because if we can get one provincial government on board with some of our challenges, that gives us a bigger voice with the federal government.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. And I think that just goes back to Ryan's comment at the beginning. That certainly is next steps that now that we have ended these 6 roundtables. The challenge for Eric, Ryan, Nathan, and myself is, how do we organize such a fantastic group and all of these amazing comments that we've heard and actually take them somewhere. And so, as Ryan noted, for those who are interested in participating on a go-forward basis in sort of that next stage, please do send Ryan a note, and we will be in touch with respect to next steps. And Ryan, perhaps you can jump on in a little bit if you have any more specificities about what we're thinking there. Ofere, I see you've raised your hand.
Sorry, I was on mute. So, I mean, what everyone has just been saying from, I think I heard stigma and so many things. From our experience, because you can consider Scott's Miracle Grow as a traditional company, it is different with Health Canada when it comes to cannabis. We can gather data, we can do all the research we want, and this is just from our experience, because I've been to the minister's office several times just on this issue of cannabis. There is just that strong hold there, like, we're not gonna let this go. We're gonna take it the way we want it. I'm just practical telling you. I tell you, MP Don Davis told me in person about the stigma thing you talked that was mentioned. He's part of it. He's an MP. He pushes for this. He wants this industry to grow. And like Jonathan said, I speak to my colleagues in the US, and you're right. We're gonna get slaughtered once they get it legalized. I'm just gonna be frank. To me, it looks like a joke. That's the way, from all we'll be doing, all of the work we've done since BLC 25 and everything. This looks like, you know what, guys, I told you I was gonna legalize cannabis, and I've done it. Check mark. That's it. Okay, from our experience in lobbying and do all this work. Okay, I've legalized cannabis. Take it that way. Now we got this 3 years of review. It was Don Davis that pushed for that to be there. If it wasn't Don Davis was pushing that we need 3 years to open up this thing and let's review it, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't even have opportunity to start, talking to them again and what have you. So the reason I'm mentioning this is just the difficulty in dealing with Health Canada. We can gather everything we need. We even went to public safety to see if we can go through public safety and do some things. And it was still the same thing. It was just like, guys, we're not ready for these. They tend to listen to us because we're traditional industry. Yeah. We're not new, right? We have years of experience in what we've been doing. But at the end of the day, it is just what they want to do.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Fer, and I think hopefully what Nathan and others on this call are suggesting is rather than you as Scots being out there on your own, maybe there'll be a force of a group of people who are able to provide that voice that's necessary to engage regulators in next steps. I just wanted to point out, and we have a lot of hands raised in the last 20 minutes, but I did want to just note a comment that was made in the chat that I think was a very strong one. Kadisha made the comment that, in addition to ancillary businesses, a lot of academia have embraced the cannabis industry, and there's college programs across the country that are encouraging young people and students into the sector. So for the future of young Canadians, it will be important, to ensure that they're being taught about an industry that will be around when they're out of college. And that is, I think, that academic sector is another important group that we could engage in this ongoing discussion. So thank you, Kadisha, for that comment. So in the last 20 minutes, we have Matthew, Nathan, Omar, and Will. So Matthew, we'll turn it over to you.
Hello, thank you. Hope everyone's having a good day. I'm Matthew, the founder of CanScript, and I've been really pleased to be engaging with this series of discussions that the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has hosted. I think it's a fantastic idea to be proactively engaging in the ways that the industry see both the Cannabis Act and also regulations could improve in a way that we can proactively engage Health Canada on that as well. We're an ancillary business. We're purely digital, and we're actually a niche of the industry as well. We're really looking to provide solutions for licensed sellers of medical cannabis, specifically by making it faster, safer, and more efficient to do business. My experience with the regulatory framework to date has actually been really positive. I think there are a number of barriers and a lot of bureaucracy that regulations and legislation can create. However, as ancillary businesses, I actually see that as a real opportunity to provide value to the industry by introducing solutions that help to streamline all of that regulatory compliance and, in fact, turn it into a competitive advantage or a way to delight customers. And so we celebrate the regulation in a way, and I think it actually positions Canada globally as a country that's approaching cannabis legalization maturely. And I really hope that our engagement with Health Canada going forward can really encourage them to think about ways that they can continue to support the businesses grow and thrive. In terms of a specific policy position, the only thing that I can really selfishly recommend for ancillary businesses is to make it a bit clearer in the regulations, ideally that ancillary businesses can promote to any non-consumers. Right now, I see it as being quite focused on exclusions around the licensed producers themselves. But I think that if we want to promote the maturity of the industry, if we want to educate organizations, then Health Canada could help us doing that by making it more clear that we can engage in B2B marketing activities so long as we're not targeting end customers. And that's all from me.
Great, thank you very much, Matthew, for your insightful comments, and it's good to hear that you are able to flourish under the existing regulatory framework. So I'm hopeful we'll have some additional conversations with you on that. And Nathan, did you want to offer a couple of responses before we go to Omar and then Will to end, and then maybe Ryan will move to you once to provide some concluding remarks. No, maybe Nathan is.
I can wait for.
Over to you, and then Will.
Look, I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments made by Nathan and others. There has been a good amount of actual advocacy done in this space in the last couple of years, and a lot of it's been done by the Chamber. Just look at some of the work that was done around the COVID relief packages that were able to benefit the industry. So, I think we do need to recognize that. The other thing I would say is, the first step that everyone here has taken in terms of building a stronger advocacy system is to be on this call and to participate in groups like the Chamber. There are other associations as well who are doing good work. And there is strength in numbers. Lastly, I would say, you know, I've heard a lot of blame on Health Canada, and you know, trust me, they're not without blame. But they operate in the box that is given to them by the political decision makers. And the political decision makers, and I used to be one of them, I should have probably introduced myself off the top. So I'm Omar Khan with High Tide. We operate 70 retail stores across the country, but I'm a former chief of staff to a health minister as well. You know, they operate in a political framework, and the political framework right now leads most of the parties to believe that there is no benefit in championing anything to do with cannabis. There's no political benefit to them. And that is largely because huge swaths of urban Canada that have large multicultural populations still have a great deal of stigma against cannabis. And the industry, to be blunt, hasn't done much to address this, to be frank. So I would start, we have 54 people on this call. Those are 54 MPs and provincial legislators and city councillors and mayors that can be reached out to, so that A, they know they have people in their communities who are employing their citizens, and then B, start to do some outreach to your local community organizations. You know, we see the largest level of stigmas with the South Asian and Southeast Asian populations in Canada. Let's start doing some outreach there. I know groups like Normal and others are doing good work in this regard, but there's more work to be done. So I just wanted to echo, good work has been done, more can be done, but you know, we have to all start, you know, individually start doing, and you know, complaining is great, but we also have to start doing.
Great, thank you, Omar, and you know, thank you for that reminder. I think when people that speak about equality, I think it is the underlying stigma that people were generally referencing in the recognition of the absence of political will. I do think sometimes when the reference is made to Health Canada, it is to not only, it's not so much Health Canada, but to your point, it is the fact that jurisdiction really has only been handed by the government to Health Canada, and that other sectors of the government that could be part of the discussion, could be part of the growth of the business, have no jurisdiction, have not been given that jurisdiction to do so. And so I think that when we target Health Canada, it's not really just the bureaucracy of Health Canada we're speaking to, but more the way that the structure and the framework has been put into place. But very, very important points for us to keep in mind. So Will, I think we will go to you, and then I think there should be time, Nathan, for you to jump in if you'd like before Ryan provides some closing remarks.
Hi everyone, I'm speaking from the perspective of a microprocessor that just has a microprocessing license and also a broad acre industrial hemp grower. And there's kind of 2 points I want to touch on, and one is to kind of echo the difficulty in and around connecting or discussing or asking for clarity from Health Canada. Easy to ask for clarity, but difficult to get answers. There's been a number of what would be seemingly very simple and straightforward yes or no answers of questions on just like, what is the number that you're looking for this specific thing? When you ask Health Canada, and there was one example, we asked them 3 different times over the course of 6 weeks and still have yet to hear an answer, which it benefits ancillary services, because then we're 6 weeks in thinking like our run rate of draining $1,000 a day of not getting to market in time to finalize an amendment to our license. All of a sudden we're dumping $400 for an hour to answer a very simple yes or no question to a consultant, which in turn increases our costs, slows us getting to market, and it generally doesn't benefit the industry as a whole. Just kind of airing that. And then number 2, which is something that I'm learning more about, and again, I'm relatively naive, but we're really keen on developing the CBD aspect of things and then kind of jumping into terpenes as it goes. But I've been speaking to folks that are on the academia side of things and asking them about health benefits and where's documentation that we can like kind of like get out there. And I know that retail cannot directly engage with people about the health benefits side of that, but I feel like there's a huge untapped ancillary aspect of the health benefits that we could really kind of get out there. That is a common consensus on a federal level of what the accepted health benefits are. That sure, you don't let the retailers misguide people, but it's just a common known medical whatever it is agreements across the board of what some of those low-lying health benefits are. But in talking to some of these academia folks, they said they've told me, and maybe this is just them in their ignorance, that a lot of the research has been asked to stop and has been stopped and is not allowed to continue. And I have no lens in on that or understanding of that. I don't know if there's some weird pharmaceutical stuff coming around, or maybe what they said isn't even true. I should preface with saying that, but that alone, it worries me a little bit. And we are a microprocessor. We only have so much time and so many resources. We're shoestringing it. So a lot of these items, we're just hoping that other people are able to, including the government, the federal government, are able to articulate and emboss or figure out and create those kind of base tones across the industry in order to help us flourish and focus on what we do best, and that's working on the processing aspect of that and creating products and getting to market. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Will. I have no insight into your latter comment. Other people on the call may, but certainly if nobody does, we will speak to the academic community to see if there is any truth to what you had heard. On the health benefits of CBD, we did have a prior roundtable on cannabis health products, and I expect going forward there will be an entire work stream. And so finding a common consensus on what types of health claims could be made, I think will fall really into that cannabis health product work stream. So if you're interested, please do raise your hand for that work going forward. Okay, so in the last 10 minutes, Nathan and Ryan, over to you, although Matthew, I think, did want to jump in if the opportunity allows.
Why don't we've got 10 minutes, so why don't you go ahead, Matthew, and then we can turn it to Nathan, and then I'll just wrap things up before we hit the bottom of the hour.
Thanks, Ryan. I just wanted to echo Will's comments, actually, and speak to a vein of discussion that that was brought up earlier in the session in terms of the role that the Canadian Chamber of Commerce could continue to play to help support the industry. It sounds to me from Will and the microprocessor side of things, but really for all license holders across the industry, there are solutions that are in the market and they're looking for, and perhaps the Chamber could play a role in facilitating, showcasing some of these ancillary businesses to license producers out there. I think part of the challenge of all of this is actually the marketing side of things, and a large aspect of that is the regulations. And so to the extent that the Chamber can play a role in connecting some of these businesses to help speed up the time to market and reduce the operating costs, improve the margins, I think that would be really helpful to the entire industry.
Great. No, thank you, Matthew. I think, Will, that's an invitation to connect on LinkedIn. Sounds like you may have some solutions, and I think there are obviously a lot of people working in the technology and software space, innovating in this sector. So that's a good suggestion. Nathan, do you want to jump in there quickly?
Yeah, if I may, there's a couple of. I want to try and end on a higher point, because I think one of the things that we have to continue to matter. And yes, I did lead the double entendre. That was for you, Eric, as a geeky legal thing there. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is we didn't exist 3 years ago for most of the people that are on this call. We have a lot of frustrations, but it's also a lot of opportunities, not only domestically but abroad. And we need to start selling the positive stories instead of always complaining about where we came from. But we need to start telling about where we can go. And I think, again, this group is uniquely designed for this. The year of the Cannabis Review gives us the ability for us to consolidate the disparate groups at a municipal, provincial, and federal level into an active conversation about what cannabis can be and what its economic role in a COVID recovery is. So instead of us being doom and gloom a little bit, I think we should talk about some of the optimism and opportunity, because if you always go in with a heavy hand, it's much harder for a politician or a bureaucrat to give you the things you want. And I think there's more successes that we forget about sometimes. So I just wanted to bring that little context in there. I think there's a lot of positive momentum at a provincial level. I think there's a lot of non-traditional advocates for the cannabis sector. When municipal governments are desperate for revenue, when provincial governments are desperate for revenue, when the federal government is trying to figure out how to hire and fill the largest two segments of the unemployed group, 15 to 24 and 24 to 35. A lot of those people are in the cannabis sector or are transitioning into the cannabis sector. I'm not advocating that those below the age of 19 should be in the cannabis sector, so just quickly put that out there for the media that might be on the call. But I think, you know, one of the things that I think we should talk about is look at the representation of the people that are on this call. The youth, the age, and the experience that people are getting for the new wave of corporate leadership is pretty incredible, and they're cutting their teeth in one of the most difficult regulatory environments and the most difficult regulatory businesses, and those are things that we can start to solve. So I think there's more optimism than negativity, and I think the year of the review gives us the opportunity for that. And the one last point that I think is really important is America's the big beast beneath us. We're all watching with bated breath, but it has not been easy in Canada, and we had one system that trickled down. How that's going to work with 33 states that is going to have a federal system put on top of it, and then a state-based approach that has to be pushed down to the corporate world is not going to be easy. I think there's actually more opportunity for Canadian businesses to help build America than we give ourselves credit for, and more credit for solutions for us, because we've already had the battle scars on how this can be done. So before we are all worried about the states, and the states builds brands better than anything else, that's probably the thing that they do the best in the world, right? You can go to a village in Papua New Guinea and see a dude wearing a Tupac shirt, right? Like, they export soft power better than anybody else in the world. But Canadians have done regulated federalism for cannabis first, other than poor Uruguay. So more opportunities than not. So we just have to figure out our role to lead that conversation, not power in that conversation. And I think leaders like this phone call can help do that. Thanks everybody for partaking. It's really exciting, and we look forward to seeing where this conversation can continue to go. And let's all go make some money and sell some cannabis.
Great. Thanks, Nathan, for that. So maybe we're almost at the bottom of the hour here. So just a couple of items before we wrap up. You know, I'm actually quite pleased that through some of this discussion that we got to issues around how industry can work together and what we need to do. I appreciate Fern off the near the top. You said, you know, when industry comes together and speaks collectively, that's when we have the most impact. And I think through discussions like this, that's what we're trying to do. And Omar, to your point, you know, where we target our efforts needs to be broad and wide, and it's easy to complain about the front line, which in many cases is Health Canada, but we have a lot of work when it comes to changing hearts and minds at the political level, among staff, elected officials, at all levels of government, as well as the broader Canadian public. So for us, you know, short term, you know, just to touch on something you were sort of asking with Jonathan about where we go from here. As I said at the top, this is the beginning of a process for us that directly drives towards public communications and advocacy targeted at officials and elected officials with regards to the Cannabis Act. We'll be directly taking all of the items that we've taken from these 6 consultations. We've recorded them, downloaded the chats, downloaded the surveys. We'll be working with Dentons and Davies to put together a package of information, following on with some more direct consultations with our members and others, so that we can directly take that to government this year in advance of the Act review. So this is all actionable, sort of actionable information that we're pulling from these sessions. In the medium and longer term, this is called the National Cannabis Working Group for a reason, because we have a lot of work to do, and we're always looking for participants that want to engage in that work with us. We're not looking for somebody to sign up with an association fee and then forget about it until a year later when we knock on their door to renew. We're looking for people, and so far we've been successful with staffing this and filling this with companies and individuals that are really willing to put time and effort into our meetings and to calls like this and other things that we've been doing to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward for industry. So, I would love for anybody who's on this call who's not a member to get in touch. Our strength is in our numbers. So not only that, I'd love anybody who knows somebody who thinks they would be a good participant in this to send them an email and tell them to get in touch too, because we've grown the group from 17 members when we first started it in mid-2019 to over 70 companies now, and we've been pretty successful in making it a broad-based group, and that's only going to carry our work forward, and we've got a lot ahead of it. So before we wrap up, I want to thank Elisa for doing an excellent job moderating the session. It was really well run. To her firm, Davies, to Eric Foster and Dentons, they've been crucial in helping us run these sessions, but also all the work that we have now that comes afterwards. To Nathan Meissen, Diplomat, the co-chair of the working group, and to everybody who's taken time out of their busy schedules to make these really worthwhile discussions. I think since November, it's around over 9 hours of discussion. Several hundred companies have taken time to provide feedback. So thank you all. You'll obviously hear and see more from us as we progress with this exercise. And if you would like to continue to stay involved, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And lastly, thank you to Leanne from the Canadian Chamber, who ran the back end for this entire session and made sure everything ran smoothly. So thank you, Leanne, for keeping us on track. All right, take care.